lifetime Medicaid recipients, and gentlemen. This is a response to the Sheldon, Iowa video by loser McCainisthrough. I found this video to be quite amusing. This user characterizes the people of Sheldon, and as an aside, I don't know who you're accusing of. I don't know why you got it in for Sheldon. I've never been there though, so I can't tell you my opinion of Sheldon. Although if you do have a problem with Sheldon, you could maybe take it up with Tom and Terry Brands. I'll let you Google them, find out who they are. He or she, this user characterizes the people of Sheldon as a community of quote-unquote hayseeds, Bible sniffers, and fat, unemployed, uneducated cow milkers, fast food workers, and janitors. Okay, I'm sure, have you ever heard the phrase, those who live in glass houses should not throw stones? For example, your difficulty with the words indisputable and immeasurable, okay? So maybe you shouldn't toss those stones because you're living in a glass house. As for the fast food worker part, you remember that kid in Florida who was asking a question of Obama, and he went berserk and kind of made a fool of himself, saying, "Thank you, oh God, thank you for answering my question." And he was stumping for more health care and higher pay because he worked at McDonald's. Now, would you call him stupid? Keith Overbite even had him on his show. Now, you wouldn't call him stupid because it seems like he's going to vote for Obama. So you'd have to change your tune. I, on the other hand, if I had confronted a Republican ethanol farmer, whether he voted for Bush or not, or liked Bush, or he could have loved Bush, I would still say, you're on welfare, buddy. You're getting subsidies at my expense. I wouldn't change my tune just because he's a Republican, but we know you would if you were confronted by that kid. As for janitors, you remember Senator Tom Harkin at the Wellstone Memorial? You do, don't you? Remember when he went nuts? Do it for Paul, for the people who clean our bathrooms. You should download it. It really is awesome. Senator Harkin unplugged going ballistic at a funeral. Senator Harkin likes those janitors, and a lot of those janitors would vote for him. Are they stupid now? Okay. Let's look at Iowa en masse now, because Iowa is large. Most of Iowa is a lot of small communities. There's not a lot of big cities. Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, Sioux City might qualify. Depends on what your definition of big is. But Iowa is a lot of towns like Sheldon, smaller communities. We have a higher percentage, I would reckon, of people working on farms than most states. A thing you might have left out. This user left out, for example, Iowa since 1988, going from the 1988 presidential election, and I'm sure this is all review to you. We voted for the Republican nominee one time. That was George W. Bush in 2004. It was close. Gore won in 2000. It was really close. Clinton won easily twice. We even voted for Michael Dukakis, for crying out loud. I mean, that's how bad it is. That's how bad it's getting. And in 2008, of course, Hussein Obama, because he was in love with ethanol and McCain wasn't, he won easily. Now, when you consider Iowa's getting a lot of subsidies via, and as you may know, I'm sure again this is all review to you, of course. Ethanol has been getting ramped up, but I'd like to focus on another thing I've seen you whine about: corporate welfare. Like Republicans are the only party that engages in corporate welfare. They both do, and nothing makes me madder than a politician who gives tax breaks and subsidies to a certain industry. And I could bring up a whole bunch of those if you want me to, that Democrats have done, rather than cut taxes across the board. Oh, well, we'll give these Hollywood movie producers in Michigan a subsidy, a tax cut, to do their movies here, and it'll be such a large one, they can get so many deductions that we hardly gain anything out of it. Okay, great. And none of the jobs are permanent, of course. As soon as the movie's done, they're out of there. But let's look at ethanol subsidies. Guess who, tell me, when did the ethanol tax credit start? Do you know? Without Googling. No, of course you don't. It started in 1977. Jimmy Carter, his Democrat Congress. They started the ethanol tax credit. And who was it that kicked it up and made the 10% mandate law? You go to a gas station, especially in Iowa, you can't go 5 feet without running into an ethanol pump in Iowa. Who started the 10% mandate? Do you know without Googling? Of course not. It was 1994. Bill Clinton was president. Democrat Congress, Democrats controlled both chambers at the time until November. And it was a 50-50 deadlock in the Senate. It had passed the House. 50-50 deadlock in the Senate. And Uncle Albert Gore Jr., the senator's son, went to the Senate floor and broke the tie. And, of course, that legislation passed the Senate, got through the conference report. Bill Clinton signed the legislation, 10% ethanol mandate is law. And guess what? That benefits Iowa, and there's tons of subsidies going into it. It is corporate welfare. Then in 2005, Bush and his Republican Congress, with Democrat support, of course, and I'll blame the Republicans for that, they went all in on ethanol. They went hog wild, and they ramped up the mandates. And they did it even more in 2007 under a Democrat Congress. And what's the ethanol mandate now? Can you tell me without Googling? Oh, you can't. 36 billion gallons by 2022. It's 9 billion gallons now. It's quadrupling. We're going to be throwing all kinds of food in the gas tank. So farmers are getting paid big bucks to plant corn, to grow corn. It is subsidized. I don't have the figures right in front of me. Oh, we pay oil refiners a certain amount. The 2008 Farm Bill, of course, reduced it to like 46 or 48 cents per gallon. It was like 53. Oh, by the way, how many Democrats voted to sustain President Bush's override of the 2008 Farm Bill? Can you tell me without Googling? No, you can't. None of them did. They all voted for it. Most Democrats voted for the 2002 Farm Bill as well. So this state that you're making fun of, Iowa, is being propped up by corporate welfare subsidies for uneducated, as you would say, cow milkers. Actually, it's not cow, it's ethanol farmers. Subsidies. And they're voting Democrat. This is our third term of a Democrat governor, Chet Culver. Democrats took control of the legislature in January 2007, expanded their majorities in January 2009. This is a Democrat state. You just inadvertently lampooned your own base. Lastly, we have this. Why is Iowa in recession? This is the state auditor's report. Courtesy of my state representative, I will not name that person, of course. While certain agencies and programs had their general fund spending cut, overall spending went up $5.9 billion in fiscal year 08, $6.1 billion in fiscal year 09. Remember, this is a Democrat Congress and Democrat governor, and $6.3 billion in fiscal year 2010. Fiscal year 09 and 2010 include federal stimulus funds, that's coming from federal taxpayers, used for general fund purposes. The budget has not been cut. The fiscal year 07 budget, the last budget approved by House Republicans, spent $1.01 for every $1 of ongoing revenue. The 2010 budget spends $1.14 for every $1 of ongoing revenue. That doesn't make sense, but they're doing it. That is simply not sustainable and leaves a gigantic spending gap in 2011. The auditor believes the spending gap between revenue and expenditures in fiscal year 2011 is $1.062 billion. If the remaining federal stimulus dollars are used to help fill the gap, that means it comes from federal taxpayers. There's your welfare right there for a Democrat state. It would mean the state would need 15% revenue growth in fiscal year 2011 to make up the difference between revenue and spending. According to the auditor, $248 million was shifted out of the Rebuild Iowa Infrastructure Fund for general fund purposes. If these funds were allowed to remain in the RIIF, dang. The entire iJobs program could have been funded on a pay-as-you-go basis in less than 6 years. Borrowing $1.664 billion to receive $765 million in net bond proceeds means that for every $1 of construction in the next 2 years, it will cost the taxpayers $2.18 over the next 25 years. So there you go. There's your Democrat state, Iowa, sucking off the governmental teat, getting subsidies. And yes, like I said, from 1988 on, we voted for the Democrat nominee every time but once. We're in our third term of a Democrat governor who's spending like a drunken sailor, and the Democrats have controlled the legislature for 3 years. So, Sheldon, Iowa, and Iowa en masse, a Democrat enclave, and you just made fun of them. That's terrible. That's just terrible.